let's get rid of that view. That's for sure. That's horrifying. Hi, everybody. I'm Jimmy. I'm alcoholic. Grateful to be alive and sober. And God, back on Zoom. I haven't been on a Zoom meeting in quite a while. So it's kind of, I'm going to have to adapt a little bit. I mean, I just had a conference this past weekend in Palm Springs, California, and it was just a lot of people and just had eyeball to eyeball. But whether you're on Zoom or whether you're in here, the conversation is always going to be about God. And when Raquel asked me, and I didn't know I was so stern, but when Raquel asked me, she goes, "Get somebody to ask," and I knew right away I wanted to ask Mike because me, Mike, and even Ralph. I mean, we're all under the same tree of sponsorship with Bob, and me and Mike have been together quite a few times, golf trips, hanging out, doing AA, and I couldn't think of a better guy because Mike's a guy that reminds me of me. He's half my age, but he reminds me of me. And when we tell our stories are quite similar. And he's a guy, and he'll talk about himself, but he's a guy from North Dakota. I'm a guy from Jersey. I mean, what would we have in common? Well, just about everything. Angry young men. That's what we were. Well, he still is. I'm not. So, so just to, I'll just kick off. Like, I don't know what we're going to do here. Like everyone else that has done these talks, I've been on here once before, and you know, what's going on today? Let me start with today, right? And we were talking prior to the meeting. I just moved to a new house here, and about a week ago, me and my wife was talking, and or not even a week ago, about a month ago, we were sitting with the lawyers and the realtor, and I think one of them said, the most two stressful times in your life is through divorce, done that, and moving. Well, we're doing that, and after close to 25 years making this move, and they're telling us about how much stress we have, but me and my wife are sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous. Our reply was, "We got God. We'll never have a problem." Well, that lasted about 8 minutes, when we, started to look at what was in front of us of packing a house together and all that stuff. But, and I bring that up because, I'm looking out, not here, on the other side of the house. We're very fortunate. We moved onto a golf course, and yesterday, I took a walk around the golf course just to see where I'm at. I don't even know what holes were outside. And ironically, my house sits between hole 6 and 7, steps 6 and 7. And when I was telling Mike this, he was like, "Oh, the holes that separate the men from the boys." And but it was just ironic that I thought about that, and I was thinking about this talk today, and I was thinking about, you know, just life. I mean, just life, and my blind spot. My biggest blind spot is my agnosticism. Right? I think that's all our blind spots. Like how many times I think I could control and manage my life, but at the end of the day, when I do an inventory, I see like how I fell short with fear or self-centeredness or selfishness or whatever the character defect of the day is. And how many times I can look back on my day and see how, I fell into that trap again, the old trap of, "Here, God, here's the drink problem. I'm going to handle the rest of my life." It's really hard to experience serenity when your self-will run riot, right? So I think my talk, or what I like to talk about, and maybe tonight, is just the discipline of pausing when agitated or doubtful, to be able to get to that place of from calamity to serenity, right? We hear it all the time. God's always in a pause, but I'm living life at breakneck speed, and I forget a lot of times that I need to get quiet, and I need to settle down, I need to slow down. I mean, and have this conversation, have this prayer life, have this meditation life, and have conversation with the people that I really care about. And so that's where I'm at right this moment. We'll see what goes on, but there's a lot of things on my mind tonight. So I'll let Mike just talk a little bit. Will not let him. There you go, Mike.
Thanks, Jimmy. I'm Mike. I'm an alcoholic. I guess I had no idea. I have no idea what this thing is going to be about. So I'm wide open, but I tend to try to operate unplanned and wide with an open heart, just to give anybody, whatever experience I might have. And in thinking about this conversation, when Raquel was reading in the beginning, is just how I've developed my relationship with God, my understanding of God, this experience of God. I really feel like God is an experience if I allow it to be that, versus me trying to drive to have an experience, right? There's a fine line between me trying to experience God and then experiencing God. And the difference is when I'm trying to do it, I'm still being God. I'm trying to make something happen. I'm trying to cultivate whatever it's like when a new guy asks you for help and he said, "Hey, I heard you give that talk. Can you bring me through the steps?" And I want to have that experience. It's like, well, that experience will happen when God shows up in your life and decides that it's time, that it's on time. And I guess today I choose to believe I've got an on-time God, and I try to live my life in a pretty surrendered state. And when the call comes from, Jimmy, whom I hold in high regard, and I love. I'm very attracted to men in Alcoholics Anonymous, like Ralph on the call as well, who are active, strong communicators, but their feet, more importantly, match their mouth, and they're not afraid to let you see where they trip over their own feet, and where they've had blind spots and ended up, making a mistake. Because to me, that's relatable. I think before I ever came in and stayed in Alcoholics Anonymous, for whatever reason, I don't know if it was just the way I tried to listen, because I was looking for a reason to leave, but it was like all I ever heard was people came here, got perfect, got God, and the rest was history. And that's not my experience. I come here and I don't feel perfect. I don't think perfect. I don't want to act perfect. I don't know how to do any of this. And I always felt like I was starting from behind. And when I heard men and women alike, but specifically men like Jimmy or our sponsor Bob talking about being a flawed man, just a man nonetheless, who's left to my own devices, I'm powerless. And I think that is what I'd like to talk about, and most importantly, the need to continue to deepen and strengthen this relationship with God. I heard a guy, and this was when I got sober. I was a kid who, if you came to me, and I really couldn't have a God conversation when I got here. You had to really spoon feed it to me, because I was pretty resistant to it. The idea of it was, I was raised Irish Catholic. I've been sinning since as far back as I could think. And I knew I was going to hell, and I lived my way in the streets. I lived my life in a way that was, I was not good to God's kids. I was not a friendly person. And my life drastically changed when I started to go through the steps in a way that I couldn't. The evidence of what happened to me in my life, the guy who sits here today is not the same guy that walked in here. And it started on the back of prayer through the inventory process. But even then, I remember having my first sponsor at 13 months sober. We were sitting down and my life had completely changed. And he came to me and he said, "Hey, he said, I got to tell you something, that the God that you've come to believe in isn't God at all. I'm 13 months sober." He said, "There's only one God, and that's your Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ." And I looked at him, I said, "This isn't going to work for me." Because I said, "This is not going to work. I can't do that right now." And he said, "I figured you'd say that, so you're going to want to find a different sponsor." And then this guy left. He left AA because he wanted to go somewhere where he felt comfortable talking about what it was that he believed in. And that man got drunk within 9 months, and he's been drunk for the last 18 years. He cannot get back here. He let a thing. And it was always explained to me a long time ago you can do things in addition to Alcoholics Anonymous, but almost certainly nothing in substitution for Alcoholics Anonymous. And where my life goes and where I've come, and that was 13 months sober, and today I can enjoy going to church with my girlfriend, and she loves it, and I love going to be able to go somewhere to experience seeking and deepening that relationship with somebody who doesn't necessarily have alcoholism or need to have this kind of conversation. And even most recently, and I'll kick it back to Jimmy, I was I was in church and I heard this guy give up to give a sermon because I can go in and hear the message. And he said, it was wild. And I think about this with an AA talk and any talk that any of us give. But he said, I hope that when I'm done giving this talk, you don't remember my name, but you remember his for what he's done with my life. And I think that that is the story for all of us here in Alcoholics Anonymous, that yes, Jimmy or Ralph or whomever's on the call can be a great communicator. But the reality of it is I'm a dead man walking in and of myself. And the only reason that I'm here is because God's decided to spare my soul. And I did what we do here, and glory be to him, right? For some reason, he feels like I got a reason to come here and talk with Jimmy. So we'll see where the story goes, but I'll give it back to you, Jimmy.
We use the phrase, but for the grace of God, quite often. I do, but for the grace of God, second in inches, it was about 34 years ago, and I've told this story a gazillion times. I'm a guy that was raised Catholic. I'm a guy that did all the sacraments. I'm a guy that was brought to church when I was younger. I'm a guy that, I believe in God, but, my agnosticism took over I don't even know what agnosticism meant or agnostic meant when I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I just thought that I knew better than anything else. And why do I need a God of my understanding or misunderstanding, So here I am, I'm giving a talk on the second step. I'm lying to everyone. I used to say, or I still say, I don't need to have worked a step to talk about a step. I could just make up stuff, and tell some jokes and read the 12 and 12 and throw some lines out. And at the end of this meeting, this guy walked up to me and, he looked at me and said, you're kind of screwed, in a little saltier language. And I want to start a fist fight in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous because I don't know how to face resistance with no resistance or confrontation without violence. I'm still an angry young guy, at 5 years without a drink in my system, an active member of a group, but, I'm doing everything but those 12 steps. And, I wasn't really back in where I got sober, the neighborhood. It wasn't really, the book wasn't pushed on us, or the steps even really. It was speaker meetings, it was discussion meetings, maybe 12 and 12 meetings. So, did I hear the steps? Yes, I'm sure I did. But did I ever take the steps, work the steps, or apply these steps to my life? No, I didn't. So at 5 years without a drink, I'm dying in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, dying of something, I didn't even know what to call it. I come to find it's just untreated alcoholism. I'm 32 years old. I'm filled with rage and anger. I'm still like an 8-year-old kid, a 10-year-old kid that never has left me. I still have feelings of insecurity and inadequacies. I'm still holding on to secrets. I grew up in a violent home. I grew up in a house that was crazy. So I'm walking around with just a boatload of stuff inside of me, and I'm not really talking about anything with anyone about it. I'm not really trying to turn my will and my life over to the care of God, because I don't even know what that means, But I'm sitting with this guy, Bill Grace, and, ironically from St. Paul, Minnesota, where our sponsor's from. And he's starting to paint the picture of what this is really looking like, And he always talked about the 2 goals of AA, the 2 goals of AA. The obvious one, not pick up the first one, but the second goal is the goal we all want to attain, and that's to step into the sunlight of the spirit, to have that spiritual experience, to have that psychic change, a personality change, whatever language you want to do, to have that transformation, right? And the only way he knew how to do that or transfer to me was by sharing his experience and walking me through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. But he also talked to me about me. And he also talked to me about what he was seeing in me in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and how my behaviors and how my anger and how my character defects were so apparent to everyone, and what happened on this particular day is that he just painted me so far into the corner that I had no choice but to take one of those 2 alternatives. He said, Jimmy, keep living the way you live, and good luck. I doubt you'll stay sober. Or be willing to step into this mystery called spirituality, and what I understand today is I really had to hit rock bottom, right? It's really hitting rock bottom that I became willing to look at this spiritual life that you guys are talking about. And what he did for me was he started to take me through this process of the 12 steps. And he started to have conversations with me. And, when I was on this talk, this call last time, I was with Harold Long. And, Harold, talks a lot about the spiritual disqualification or the box of certainty. I remember him talking about that, and this box that we all get put into sometimes, this certainty. Like, I'm pretty certain that God's not going to help a guy like me. I'm a thief. I'm a criminal. I've done a lot of bad things in my life. There's no way in the world that God is ever going to help a guy like me. This delusion of spiritual disqualification, right? I have all these excuses. I have all these reasons. I have all these alibis and rationalizations and justifications and victimization of why God wouldn't help a guy like me, right? This guy sat point blank right across from me and shared his story with me and his life with me, and he was a lot like me, and at the end of the day, all he asked me to do was, well, am I willing to go into the darkness of my life and start uncovering, discovering, and discarding the things that are blocking me, not only from God, but blocking me from you? See, if I've come to believe that the fundamental idea of God is deep down in every man, woman, and child, but it's blocked. It's blocked by pomp, worship, calamity, all those things that it talks about, right? And I am certainly blocked from you because I'm afraid of you. You see, at the end of the day, and now 39 years and change sober, getting older every day, what I know is one thing, that fear, fear, fear is the thing that manifests itself in a lot of different ways, will always be the thing that blocks me from you and blocks me from God. And whether my fear is, financial fear, whether my fear is relationships, whether my fear is whatever it is, it comes down at the end of the day, it's fear. Now, it might come out as anger, it might come out as manipulation, it might come out as selfishness and self-centeredness, but at the end of the day, fear is the thing that grips me at all times. And see, it's really hard to live a spiritual life and turn my will and my life over to the care of God unless I'm willing to go into the darkness and start uncovering, discovering, discarding some of those things and seeing why I'm so fearful. I carry a lot of baggage like a lot of us do. All that stuff from childhood, all that stuff that I learned along the ways, all those old ideas that Roland Hazard talked about, with Carl Jung, these guiding forces of our lives. I had to examine that stuff, because my mind tells me my life should look a certain way when it comes to relationships and work and family and even AA, and I think, the minute it doesn't look the way I think things should look, well, that creates the fear, that creates the conflict in my mind. And before you know it, I'm blocked from you, I'm blocked from God, and Jimmy steps into play to try to control and manage. The biggest delusion out of any 12-step program, not only AA, is that life is controllable, right? None of us can control life. It's going to happen the way it's going to happen. I have to learn how to live in this thing called life. But the good news is this: I've been given this toolbox that's been set at my feet, right? And when adversities come, and like we're all going to have adversities, we've all gone through the ringer, I'm sure. I've been able to pick up some of the tools to get through some of the things that I thought were the hardest things in my life, But I don't do that alone. I do that with God. I ask God for the strength, the direction. I write a lot of inventory. I should talk to my sponsor. I talk to guys like Mike, right? I got my road dogs, as Ralph would say, of men in my life that I could always go to and talk about the things that are upsetting. I had a long talk. We were just talking about our other friend, Tommy. I just had a long talk with him yesterday about some things. So this whole idea of this delusional mind, this that I'm not worthy of God's love and God's mercy, being stuck in that 1960s. Mike wasn't even born back then. 1960 Catholic religion that I walked in here with, that I'm going to go to hell for everything I ever did, and that had to be smashed. That had to be smashed, and through the process of inventory, through the process of making amends, obviously, the process of all the steps, I've been able to, on most days, be able to set aside all that stuff and be willing to be open to a relationship with the power of my understanding, and it seems to be working, in this moment. So, Mike, why don't you pick up?
Thanks, Jimmy. 1960s. I think you've been sober longer than I've been alive. So thank you for being here. So lights were on when I arrived. Yeah. You know, listening to you talk, I think when I first got sober, my life changed in a way that you couldn't stop me from wanting to tell you about God. I mean, I'm 6 months sober. I figured, I conned away kind of to get myself into the jails because they said, I went to the district meeting and the district said, you got to be 2 years sober. And I said, well, the district corrections chair is open. And they were like, yeah, someone's got to take that spot. And I said, well, I'll take that spot. And they said, no, you're too new. You gotta come back. Anyway, after 3 months of showing up, they eventually gave me the district corrections chair spot. And I just changed the date, said you can go to the jail whenever you want. And then I started going to the jail. And I just wanted to go and talk to people about what has happened to me in Alcoholics Anonymous. And for whatever reason, it was just not lost on me. One, I think probably because of guys like Jimmy and men like Harold. And fortunately, the Alcoholics Anonymous I was interested and tuned into had always said, show up at places that you don't want to end up in. And I wasn't lost on me that I should probably be sitting in a cell for the majority of my life. But I guess I say all that because my life, I just heard things when I got sober, like you got a big God, so dream big. Anything you want to do, you can do, as long as you align it with spiritual principles. And kind of similar to what Jimmy was saying is I just took off with my life, very busy in AA and a lot of activity. And at 7.5, almost 8 years sober, my life blew up. And I was walking out of a marriage, and she was pregnant with our second kid. And I just had a business deal go south where I lost a lot of money. All of the things that I'd been working on, that I'd been managing, that I'd been facilitating because it was my time. It was almost like God showed up in my life and just shook the tree of like, what do you think you're doing? And I talk about it often, but it happened in a way that I was doing a lot of AA, probably sponsored 30 guys and was in the jail twice a week and in a detox on Monday nights. And I was very busy doing Alcoholics Anonymous as far as I was concerned. And, but if you were to ask me where God was at in my life and what my relationship with God looked like, or if I were to talk to you about how much I incorporated my God, like where was my God consciousness? I don't think I could have told you. I don't think God existed. I could have, like Jimmy said when he started, I could have talked to you about God. I could have talked to you about anything. But if you watched my feet, I was a maniac. And the craziest thing about it is I didn't realize how far out in left field that I was. And I think that's the scarier thing, right? When I think about alcoholism being cunning, baffling, and powerful, and it being a thing that, like the big book says, and there's a solution when this sort of thinking is established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies. The problem is that my thinking's telling me that I'm okay. I'm busy. I'm doing the thing. The 12 steps says nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics, but it doesn't say anything about spiritual growth. And that was lost on me because I was sponsored, after the guy left to go to church, I switched to a sponsor that was nothing against him, a great member of Alcoholics Anonymous, very active, probably my feet are trained to do AA the way I do AA because of that man. But where I was at with my relationship with God wasn't much of a conversation, back down to the point where after my life blew up at 8 years, and then probably at about 9 years of me having lunch every month with Bob, my now sponsor. And then this guy one day just absolutely gutted me wide open. And I just started crying because he read my, he'd been sitting and listening to me talk to him once a month for 2 years, almost. And eventually he finally, I don't know what happened, but I had an event going on in my life, and it wasn't uncommon for me to have events going on in my life because I'm constantly crushed by a self-imposed crisis I could not postpone or evade. And I lived under the delusion that that's what recovery was about as well. That you just come here and every once in a while, you just blow your life up every 18 months. That's just the way it's supposed to be. And I don't believe that to be true. I believe that to be true if I'm the guy driving the ship. I will absolutely, most indefinitely, always, invariably, right? The book says it's pretty clear, invariably, which means almost always I will step on the toes of my fellows and they will retaliate. And I'm the guy who sits there seemingly with like, why is this happening to me? You know, why is this relationship ending? Why do I always pick crazy women? Well, because I'm a broken guy who doesn't know how to communicate, you know? And it's not that they're crazy. I make them crazy. You know, it's impossible to be in a relationship with me. And that is really where my sponsor today, we started this conversation probably 9 years ago, where it was, you know, he said, you don't have any relationship with God. In fact, you don't have any relationship with anybody, because everything is the way that you want it to be at the terms that you want to set. And if it's not that way, then you just take your ball and go play somewhere else. And my life was designed in a way that I could get away doing that. Whether it was, I was, you know, had enough business going on or enough money or enough success or whatever, that I could just change the playmates and the players. And it just seemed like, oh, new scenery. And when you do that, you know, someone said that to me a long time ago, that you can put anything you want in between you and God. The problem is there's something in between you and God. But what I will do in Alcoholics Anonymous is put activity, I'll put success, I'll put money, I'll put travel, I'll put anything in between me and God. But the reality of my life is eventually I'm going to have to hit bend, and I'm going to have to go. He's calling me home. Right. And I look at it like that. I think that that's exactly what happened. Similar to what happened to Jimmy, similar to what happened to me, similar to what happened. I've heard everybody that I love to hear communicate. I get called home, and either I'm going to stop with the games. I'm going to stop with booking another flight to go do another thing because I need to go do another thing because I'm super busy, because I'm right. And I'm going to let God enter into my life, because the reality of my life is, yes, you know, you come here and things get good because I stopped drinking, which is a miracle for an individual like me. But what ultimately has to get turned over or slid back across the table is everything in my life. My work, my relationships, my false truths, you know, the stuff that Jimmy said. I mean, because of AA, I've had the opportunity to be able to go back and do a lot of deep work outside of AA, but it positioned me in enough to be able to even have those conversations. Because I realized that there I am at 14 years sober, and I have 2 kids and a good relationship with their mother, but like something's missing. And I'm thinking, well, what's missing? And it's the ability to communicate vulnerably. It was the ability to have a relationship with them. And I think the most important thing that all of that stems off of for me is ultimately my relationship with God. Because I can show up good when I'm at an AA. You want me to put me on Zoom here for an hour and 15 minutes, and I can be whatever you want me to be. But I could shut this laptop down and go back to being a maniac. And then I know, right? We got on a lot of the AA coins, to thine own self be true. But I know the truth is that I'm not living with integrity in my relationship with God. And therefore, I walk around and I feel inadequate. I feel like I don't measure up. I feel like I'm not good enough. I feel like I don't belong here. Maybe I'm going to be leaving soon. So the most important thing is still is as it's always been, my relationship with God. And that's what ultimately had to start to shift. Was it can have all the other relationships I want, but until my one relationship is going to start taking priority, and that ultimately being the time I spend with God, to set myself up to go be the guy he wants me to be in the world, then I'm operating from a place of, you know, really what I think Mike needs to do in order to get what Mike wants. And as long as I'm doing that, I'm going to be completely in left field. And I think the thing that scared me the most is how far out in left field I could be, thinking that I'm kind of in the middle, you know? And if I can't identify where God is in my life or what my relationship with him looks like, then I'd like to think that I'm in a pretty hot water. And I'll kick it back to Jimmy here, because I'll just talk about that to end, but kind of what it looks like. But I don't think I know I wouldn't be here. It was funny. I was speaking at Jimmy's thing in November, at the Jersey Shore Roundup, and his wife came up to me afterwards and she said, "Bob saved your life." And I never thought of it like that. I knew the man's changed my life drastically, but to sit in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous, very busy in Alcoholics Anonymous, but to ultimately really have no relationship with God, could talk to you about it, but had no living experience of allowing God to be God in my life. I've been very much a driver. I'm step 1, section B, management. I'm the guy, like, you give me a problem, I'm like, I'll call you. I'm like, what do you think I need to do? Write an inventory. We'll do a fifth step tomorrow. I'll go make an amend and then snap my fingers. I should be back. And it's like, sure, but there's no God in that. Because I'm that guy. I'm I've got so involved in the mechanics, and I heard Sandy Beach give a talk like that, I think recent, where he said, in AA today, back in the day when you got sober, 1939, 44, they didn't have meetings all the time. There wasn't an H&I commitment 4 times a day that you could. So you had to pray like hell. You had to pray like hell to a God that, whether or not you believed in it or not, you were praying to him to get you through to next Sunday. And then you could go to a meeting and socialize with people. And today, it's almost like Alcoholics Anonymous is set up in a way that I don't need to even have God. Because I can go to a 7 a.m. meeting and then roll into an 11 a.m. meeting and then roll into a noon meeting and then roll into a social event and then roll onto a Zoom meeting. And you ask me how I'm doing, and I'll tell you, I'm doing great. I did so much AA today, but if you were to ask me again, where's God at in my life? I would talked a lot about him today, but if you were to ask me if there's any relation there, if I sat quiet with him, I couldn't identify that. So I'll go there here in a second, but Jimmy.
By the way, you look nice with your little jacket on too. I like that.
Thanks.
So it must be a St. Paul, Minnesota AA thing where they know how to gut you when they get you. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's what happened with this guy, Bill Grace, and like Bob did with you. This guy, Bill, gutted me, Bob always likes to say, we're all human beings on a spiritual walk. Sometimes we're going to lose focus on the walk, right? Spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection, which sounds like a cop-out line once in a while, but how much does my humanness dictate my 24-hour period of my life each day, right? If I really looked, put it on a frame of, so, okay, I sleep 8 hours, 16 hours left. How much of the 16 hours was really bent towards God or towards Jimmy? Right. And that scale would be, it wouldn't look good at all. Right. So there's discipline, right? This discipline that I opened up with, that's my new word in my head lately, discipline. A lot of us are disciplined when we go to the gym. I know Mike goes to the gym. I know Ralph's in the gym all the time. I just like to see Ralph laugh. That's all. But a lot of us go. We work out. A lot of us are disciplined in the way we eat, or our meetings. Even we're disciplined. We have our set meetings. We get to the meetings. So this idea of discipline, this idea of pausing when agitated or doubtful or confused or I don't know, or has that become a way of life, right? If God is in the pause, then why can't I do that more often? If I know that intellectually, I kind of know it on a heart level spiritually. Why don't I pause more? Why am I so undisciplined when it comes to turning to God at times? All right. Now, Bill lays it out for us in, step 11. He gives us 6 disciplines in a 24-hour period starting at night, right? When we retire at night. How many of us are doing inventory? How many of us do nighttime inventory, right? I'm not judging. I'm just saying if we're not, then maybe that's a problem. On awakening, right? How many of us on awakening have a prayer life, a meditation life, read some books life, right? Or has my mind convinced me, like it used to, that driving 95 miles an hour to work is the best place to pray, right? Am I taking that time? Am I disciplined in taking that time to tap in to the most important power of my life that's going to keep me sober, right? Throughout my day, right? He talks about that, right? How many times have I stopped in the middle of the day? You know, how many of us are doing, and this is just, questions. How many of us are actually doing 10-step calls, when something crops up, right? Not if it's going to crop up, something always crops up, right? If something crops up, am I taking those disciplines of calling someone, of going to prayer, asking God to take away whatever it is? Am I making amends immediately? Am I resolutely turning my thinking mind towards helping others? Or am I still trying to figure out the problem and trying to control and manage the problem? Have I let go and let God? I used to hate that when you go to the old timers back in the day. Here's the problem of the day. And they would just look at you, let go and let God. Well, how do you do that? You pause. You pause. Because in the pause, I'll find God. And in God, I'll find serenity. And if I don't pause, this Jimmy self will run riot, and it's going to be all calamity throughout the day. Do I take the time to meditate? How many times have I heard from people, oh, I can't do that. I can't get quiet. I can't breathe. I can't whatever. Right? We have a list of excuses why we don't take 3, 4, 5 minutes to get present to the only time we're going to have, which is right now. Right? So the disciplines, it's really easy to go to the gym every day. It's really easy for me to go to the golf course. It's really easy for me to eat certain ways. But when my life depends upon the most important relationship in my life, why do I fall short on a daily basis? Right? Why do I take my foot off the gas pedal? Why do I still, after all this time and getting older, why do I still think I can control and manage my life? When the results, I've seen the results throughout the years. So, I like to do this meditation before I speak all the time. I'm not speak. I mean, just whatever. I get quiet before coming on here, going on a meeting, whatever the case may be. And there's one meditation I always listen to. I say this all the time, but I just like it because it always pops up. And the guy's going through the meditation. Then he says, "Okay, this is the thought for the day." It comes from Albert Einstein. There's only 2 ways to live your life. The first way is like nothing's a miracle. And the second way is like everything's a miracle. So I think the goal in what he was trying to tell me is that, is always to see the miracles that are going on in my life. And how many times do I take for granted the miracles that are going on in my life? I spoke at this big conference this past weekend, and a group of ladies came up to me, and they had this young kid. He was, I don't even know, maybe 20, 25 years old, like that. And he just wandered into this conference and sat down with like 10 ladies at a table. And in the receiving line, they came up to me and they introduced me to him, and he had 5 days sober at this conference. I couldn't even believe someone would be I couldn't even see myself 5 days at a conference with a couple of thousand people. And he tells me where he's from. He's from Staten Island, New York. And I said, "What are you doing in Palm Springs?" And I don't even know what he said. Maybe he was robbing his grandmother's house. I don't even know what he was telling me. And he goes, "But I have to go back to Staten Island tomorrow, and I need to find AA in Staten Island." I said, "Where do you live?" And he goes, "Decker Avenue." And I thought of my buddy Tommy T, who a lot of you guys know. Tommy T's home group is on Decker Avenue that next night. Again, is it God or is it odd? All right? I mean, these God moments, am I awake to that stuff? Am I disciplined enough to be awake to the gift of sobriety, the gift of God, the gift of good relationships? Or is everything just, a problem? Was everything, the sad state of the nation? What does my day look like? So I guess really what I just want to hop on is, a lot of us come from a pretty bad life. We wouldn't be here if we didn't, if we didn't have that, right? We've been given this gift, right? The precious gift, as Bill talks about, the 12 and 12 on step 12. What are you doing with the gift? That's what my sponsors would always say. What are you doing with the gift of sobriety? There are people dying right now out on the streets, that can't get this gift. What are you doing with your gift? And like Mike said, it's really easy to get busy in AA. I've gotten busy in AA. I've done 1,000,001 things in AA, service and sponsorship and, everything we do, But do I take the time to really sit with God? Do I really get disciplined enough to take that time period, or whether it's in the morning, whether it's during the day, or whether it's writing inventory at night? Am I really taking the time to improve on this relationship, the most important relationship in my life, with a power that has saved me? Saved me. I'm a guy that walked off the streets. I'm a guy that was homeless for a long time. I'm a guy who had nothing. And now I'm living in a beautiful home on a golf course. How does that help? Right? I've been given this gift. I got a job. We all have a job. Third step tells me I have a job, that I'm a principal, that I have a principal in my life, and I'm the agent. And this new director in my life has given me this job. And what that job is, very simple: help his kids. And if I could help God's kids, guess what? I'll get everything I need. And I'll be given a life beyond my wildest dreams. But for me, it starts with being a disciplined being. Disciplined in the sense of doing the work that I'm supposed to do on a 24-hour basis. That's the good news. It's only one day at a time, right? A daily reprieve contingent upon my spiritual condition. That's what I got. A daily reprieve. That's it. Not about Saturday, not about Father's Day on Sunday. Happy Father's Day to all you dads out there. I got today. Wednesday. I think it's Wednesday. I got today. And that's it. And tomorrow we start all over. And Friday we start all over. And Saturday we start all over. Right? So that's my new war chant. How disciplined are you in this relationship? That's important. Right? Go ahead, Mike.
Thanks, Jimmy. It's interesting. It's funny. It's similar to that's been my question as of late, is am I living with integrity in my relationship with God? Because that's a relationship that no one else knows about. You don't see that. You aren't a part of those conversations. And again, at the end of the day, I can fool anybody I want, but at the end of it, I'm just fooling myself. And I try to hold myself to high scrutiny with the questions on 86 as to what my prayer life looks like, and what my thought life looks like, and really how God conscious I am, and whether or not I'm presently engaged in that dialogue and that thought process as I go through the day, or am I overly concerned with Mike? And my problem du jour, I think of late, is I've started a new business, and some days it's square peg round hole. We got to make this thing happen, and some days it's show up and take the next indicated action and let God handle the results, and go home and be free. Or you can go home and stress yourself out, and but all of that, I think, is set up the best, just like Jimmy said, is with my commitment to that relationship with God in the morning. Because for me, that's where the pause comes. I am very much when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I've got a violent past, and when I thought I stopped hitting people, I thought that was a good thing, but I could lacerate you with my tongue, and that's okay because it's progress, and it's not okay. And I didn't know, though, how to not take the bait when I had the thought, because I just have a thought and react. I'm a pause after agitated kind of guy. I'm going to light you up, tear you to pieces, and then be like, oh man, that's not good. I'm really sorry I did that. But I'm a super principled guy, because I'll always go back. I'll make a 10 step, and I'll it'll hit my inventory at night, but I'll try to, but it's almost like I weaponize the steps to stay sick and do whatever it is that I need to be able to do in order to kind of pivot, or not pivot, but hinge my growth. But I heard a guy give a talk. It's not an AA talk. I think it was a guy talking about music, but he said all of man's problems come from his inability to sit quiet in a room by himself. And when he said it, I knew it was the truth. Because again, I can be a very busy guy. You want me to pick up a commitment or go somewhere and do something, I'm there. But if you want me to sit quiet and let God talk, that's extremely uncomfortable. In the past, it's been extremely uncomfortable for me. It'd be easier for me to pick up 3 commitments and sponsor, 17 guys with their hair on fire than to sit quiet for 5 minutes and ultimately start to have a relationship with this thing that's going to change what's this thing that is changing my life, whether I want it to or not. It's that, hung over Carl Jung's door to his office, bidden or unbidden, God is present. Whether I like it or not, he's here. Am I going to let him be? Or am I going to sit here and wrestle with this and think that I'm ultimately the guy calling the shots? And I think as I've continued to stay sober and I witness and the demonstration of the men that go before me, I'm just tired of me. And I want to allow him to be that, whatever, be what he is. But Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous says, seek the solution with the desperation of drowning man. Which means I'm going to die. And the solution would be, sure, the 12 steps, the way they're outlined in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, but the entire process is ultimately for me to have a spiritual experience as a result of working the steps. So a psychic change in a relationship with a power greater than myself. Am I seeking that relationship with the desperation of a drowning man, or do I hit snooze and sleep in because today I'm tired? Or do I believe that if I wake up and I am tired, that he can see me through because he's got the power to do it? Am I inconveniencing myself, like Jimmy was saying, to wake up and ultimately tap into this relationship so I can be and come from a place of being who God would want me to be? And that's where my life is ultimately, in the good days, there are days that I will hit snooze and I'll cut meditation short and I don't ever get settled in. And I go into the day and it can be a hectic day. I don't necessarily need to rip anybody's head off, but it's just it's a low frequency day. And the time that I can get up, the days, and it's most of the days, I can get up and I can sit quiet and I read and I get my mind centered and then I get my being centered and I'm here and I can go forth and do the things that are in front of me, bringing God with me. We're not even bringing, God already is. I get to witness the order, and that's that I am here just to show up and be whatever he wants me to be. And if that's to show up and be a good worker at work, or a good sponsor to sponsees, or a good fill in the blank, good father to my kids this weekend, whatever that is, I can do that, and I can get the marching orders versus what Mike thinks Mike needs to do in order to make God happy. And living from that place is freeing. Just like Jimmy said, had a new employer. He provided everything I need if I keep close to him and perform his work well. Everything I need. I don't need to stress. It's already handled. That's that saying. It's handled, God. Got a problem? It's handled. Don't need to worry. I just need to let God be God. And when I can show up and just continue to be in that space, I can live free, which is ultimately the thing that I've been chasing my entire life. And when I'm tapped into that, I can't help but know that it's all right. It's the same as, anything. To get the call from Jimmy to come do this is great. What an honor. that a puke kid like me who just happens to like AA and really love AA could get a call from a guy whom he loves and respects to go talk about God with him. And to not be facilitating behind the scenes to try to make that happen. It's very clear that because the call comes, I know where God wants me to be. For whatever reason, sitting and talking about God with a man that I love and adore. A man who, like, you know, could be 39 and a half years sober. And that's older than I am as an individual. And what that means to me is that I gotta do what it's the same thing for my sponsor. My sponsor's 58 years sober. I gotta do AA at an alarming rate and be an example for many years to come, because that's what the people in front of me are doing. And that's the deal. That they can light the path for me, and it's my responsibility to try to light the path for someone else. But in order for me to light that path, I got to bring the best guy forward. And that means that my relationship with God needs to be right. I have to live integrity within that relationship so I can bring forward the best individual. I believe that I deserve that. I believe that that's what God would want. And I believe that that's what I'm supposed to deliver on his behalf. Is, hey, kid, I've given you all the tools, all the resources. So fit yourself to be ready, because you're going to get called. And I think that for everybody on the call, all of us that are here in Alcoholics Anonymous, our job is to be at a place where we're fit. So that way, when the call comes, we can go. It's not a matter of, someone else Ralph will do it. Ralph's a busy guy. He'll do it. No, I need to be ready to go if or when the call comes, because the call is going to come. And it's similar to what Jimmy was saying. I've said this prayer almost every morning since I've been sober, and that's, God, please keep me sensitive for opportunities to be of service. Because I'm so self-centered, I'll miss the opportunity. And to think that Jimmy can be in Palm Springs, California, speaking at an AA event, and some kid who's 5 days sober rolls in there from Staten Island. And if you're asleep or not sensitive for opportunities to be of service, you wouldn't get to see God threading the golden needle and doing what he does. And I think that is the joy of being able to be surrendered and showing up and just saying yes when you're asked to go somewhere. Because in me doing that, I get to witness God do what God does, which ultimately just reinforces the desire to wake up early and spend time in this relationship, to continue to just, as Ralph would say, grow God and shrink Mike. So I thank you for having me here, and I think we'll be done, and I just do questions.
We are gonna have some questions. Are you ready for my questions, gentlemen? Because I have a serious one, first for both of you, but then I have one more that I'm actually afraid of giving the introduction to my question, because I'm afraid that it's going to happen like with Reggie. He goes into husband mode and he won't listen to me. So first, the question that is short, all right? Because both of you spoke about vulnerability and the journey to getting there, right? And I do want to know how, let me see. I don't believe that only certain kind of guys have this problem with being vulnerable. I hear it all the time with women like me in AA, the difficulty of getting vulnerable, of getting to that place that I need to show you who I am. And I really want to know if you have found God in those moments that you allow yourself to be vulnerable. That's my question number one. And the question number two I have is with the discipline, right? Jimmy, you spoke about discipline a lot. And every time you mentioned that word, what came to me was the root of that word, which is disciple, right? Being a follower, being a student, being a pupil, being somebody that learns. Learns what? If God doesn't make two hard terms to those who seek him, why do I need the discipline? So, is that a tough question? Is it not nice? I don't know. Go ahead, Jimmy. Say something to me, please.
Oh, there's a really short answer to that second question.
Mm-hmm.
Lazy. I'm lazy. Oh, let me give a spiritual word. I'm slothful. I'm spiritually lazy. Okay, that's the reason why I don't go to any lengths. But let me go back to the first question. I think you asked that about a week ago. I'm trying to remember what that question was. What was that question?
Being vulnerable.
Oh, being vulnerable. Being vulnerable. Because I spent a large part of my life pretending to be someone I'm not, the chameleon. And one of the things you find in recovery, well, most of you probably know this already, is, you know, when you start to uh, uh, break down or start to look at the stage character that you've created and have seen that it has gotten you nowhere, accomplishes nothing, keeps you in a state of fear, um, either change or die. And if you don't change, and if you don't become, you know, as Mike said early on, you know, it's the most, it's a line we never talk about, but it's on everyone's coin every year. To thy own self be true. Until I start to become Jimmy and not some guy I'm not. And to start being honest and share the vulnerability. Maybe some of us go over the top with that, but to their own self be true. Honest conversations with Mike, with Ralph, whoever else is on the call, you know, to be willing to talk about things that are going on, you know, and not be ashamed. See, shame, most alcoholics have shame-based identities. And see, shame will prevent me from having any kind of honest, healthy conversation with anyone. Because shame says I'm not good enough to have this conversation. Shame says you're no good. Shame says this. Shame, shame, shame. Shame of being, you know, I got a list from here to your house of all the things I'm ashamed about. And I got to walk through that stuff. Because that's just the false self. You see, that's when we feed the false self versus living the true self. And it's in the true self that I become vulnerable. False self, I put the walls up. I pretend to be someone you wanted. And at the end of the day, all that really does is hurts me, right? I think the one thing that I like when you speak, you know, like, and somebody comes up to you and they have a lot of time and they say to you, man, you just said something the way I've been living for the last 20 years. Like, you know, like you touched a nerve, you touched that spot on somebody through sharing our experience. And they come to you, and I had that this weekend with another person, and you know, this guy had tears in his eyes. He was 44 years sober, and I talked about something, and I don't even know what I talked about, but I know I hit the spot because I was vulnerable from the podium. I was vulnerable in my share. I was up to thy own self be true, and but I think the answer to your second question is I can become very lazy here. I can become very lazy, and I got to be aware of that. It's really easy to put my feet up, sober this long, done a lot of work in AA, sponsor a lot of guys. I got the list of here of all my achievements, you know. I could fall into that trap. You see, that's what my ego wants me dead, but it'll settle for me drunk, right? Feed my ego, feed my ego. So I'm sure Mike got a better answer than that from Las Vegas.
I don't know. It's a good answer. The vulnerability component took a long time. Like I said, I started businesses. And even inside a business, a lot of I was like I didn't know how to communicate. Death by banishment. If I didn't want you working for me, I'd just ignore you. It gets so uncomfortable for you to come to the office, you just have to quit. Or it would just end bad because I didn't have the tools to like have a conversation. It's how all my relationships end. And I'm sitting there 13 years sober, you know, with a lot of stuff going on. But all of my relationships are kind of ending the same. And it's comes off the back of, you know, my father walked out on our family when I was 11 years old. I've never, ever allowed myself to ever be left again in my life. I just move. I leave. I start to push. I don't let you in. As soon as you get too close to get in, wall comes up. And it's like, you got to think that's 11 years old. That thing's been retrained in that I'm completely asleep to it. I come into AA, I do a bunch of uncovering, discovering, discarding, and I don't even realize that this is going on. It's so habitual for me. It doesn't even hit my radar. And I'm sitting on a guy's couch and we're having a conversation. He said, what's your life look like? I said, why? And it's big. I've got a big life. Everything is amazing. And I said, but I'm lonely as hell because I push everyone out. And he said, well, how's that working for you? And I was like, I'm tired of it. And the reality of it is, he said, look, you're a big guy. You're a big, powerful presence. No one's going to know that it's safe to come until you let them know that it's safe to come. So it starts with you to soften those edges. My sponsor said the exact same thing. You need to soften the edges. You need to soften the way you talk. You have to, everything about you needs to change. So that way you can lead with vulnerability, even down to my kids. I've got a 10 and a 12-year-old girl, soon to be 11, then 13 in October. And it's me going to my kids and saying, hey, you know what? Sometimes I don't know what to do as a dad. I don't know what the right thing to say is, but I just want to be a good father, and letting them see that I'm sometimes unsure. So they know that it's okay and safe to be unsure. But if I don't ever do that, they don't ever get to know that that's okay. And I want my daughters to know, to be able to communicate. I want my daughters to not date men like I've historically been. I want them to date men that they know that it's safe to communicate. It's okay to have a voice. And if you don't have a voice, cut and run, because I've been the guy that, you want to date me? No voice. Here's the terms of the relationship. You're going to have a blast being Mike's girl, or whatever that is. And I've had to literally unlearn a skill that helped me survive and relearn how to ultimately choose love over ego. Because it is just my ego and my pride that's scared to get hurt. I'm scared to be let down again. And I think what ultimately has ended up happening as a result of staying here is I've just wanted love to prevail more than I care what you think about me. And until I've been able to do that, then it's been able to transfer into relationships at work. Because all of life, my sponsor said that to me. He said, kid, the tough thing is all of life is relationships. And you're terrible at it, and it was a hard thing to hear because I knew it was the truth, but it's embarked me on this journey to continue to soften the edges of Mike so I can continue to deepen the relationships with my men. I used to be a very mechanical sponsor. Bop, bop, bop. Here's what it is. Next, got to go. To really take and tune into their life and see what's going on with these men and get down in the hole with them and rub elbows and do the thing and care about their life and what's going completely changed. It's completely changed. And it wouldn't be, I think seeing that results of that, it's just made me want to continue to soften the edges. Although it's hard, it's really easy for me to boot up the old program of like, F you, pay me, that's easy for me to do, but it's not productive, and I want better results for my life. Again, I want to be the best guy that I can be. So I'll stop there.
Thank you.
Ralph has his hand up.
Yes. And actually, after Ralph, if somebody has a question, remember, this is the part of the meeting that you can ask questions. So Ralph, please go ahead.
My name is Ralph White. I'm an alcoholic. And since these are my two brothers here, I'm going to insert myself in the conversation. So I'm going to have a question, but it's going to be prefaced. So with both of you guys talking about discipline, talking about vulnerability, and I heard in both of your cases, Jimmy, you always say, I was around here all these many years and I was dying in the rooms. And Mike, you said, I was doing all this stuff. And I was putting everything between me and Alcoholics Anonymous. And in this conversation about God, I'm just wondering if you step outside yourself, because the worst thing we do is grade our own papers, which is why it's good to have a sponsor. And the best thing we do, especially when you get on a path like both of you, then I really, really take a harsh look. Do I believe when I talk about the wasted years or the years when Mike, especially, because I know you, Jim, I know you, and I've seen you, Mike. I've seen you materially successful, In fact, been out to a spot of yours where we were in the heat, just all of it. And then you let me in and get a kind of backstage pass. That wasn't really working. Do I believe that everything I did, all those activities that you did, because you were still going to be Mike Powers, you were still going to be doing business, you were still going to be making money, you were still going to be running through girls. Do I now look back and say, imagine how I would have been if I hadn't been doing all that in Alcoholics Anonymous? Because I connect the wrong dots sometimes. I think I was doing all that, and instead of, no, I still would have been Mike Powers running wild, doing what he do without all. So do I look back now and say, oh my God, look at what you did for the wild man? Same thing with you, Jimmy. So sometimes do I look back, and I guess the question from that for both of you is, and Mike, you kind of said it with your sponsorship. Jimmy, you mentioned it when you talked about the guy coming up. Would I be who I am without that journey? If you would have talked to young Jimmy and you would have talked to young Mike, you might say, here are the pitfalls you could have avoided, but would you be who you are, useful like you are, with the knowledge? Mike, the only reason you want to be a soft edge guy now is because you've been a hard edge guy. See, y'all eavesdropping. I'm sitting up here talking to them because I know, you know what I'm saying? So sometimes when I go back and I look at my report card and I'm great, sometimes I might be, wait a minute, God, thank God I was doing all this stuff that allowed me to get through that period untethered, unmoored. Because do you believe God does grace without me necessarily having to ask for it? It's just that when I get unblocked, I'm open to all of it. Anyway, I'm not supposed to be sharing. I'm just talking. The question, would you think that you could go back and be the man you are right now? And I'm gonna finish it with this, because both of you guys in this conversation, and I don't get to say it, I'll see you guys in a couple of months, but two giants in our program. Jimmy, you talk about going in the dark and the discipline, but talk about when I think of men of integrity who I lean on, who I look to, you two men right here, right now. So do you think you'd be where you are and who you are without the journey, without the days when I said I was dying or nothing was going on? Long question. I'm sorry.
Well, I guess you're right. Everything happened to me to make me the man I am today, right? And you know, a lot of times we do these, you know, ask it baskets or Q&As, and there's always that one question. You know, what would I tell my 30-year-old self? You kind of just alluded to that, Ralph. And I always think of, okay, I got to give that 30-year-old, I got to give a guy like Mike, like when I was Mike's age, I got to give Mike the perfect answer and embrace the life that God has given you. The ups, the downs, the turnarounds, you know, put the bat away, right? I'm a great guy of beating up on myself that I don't do things perfectly, right? Can't grow spiritually and beat yourself up at the same time. Those highways never crisscross, right? So self-loathing, self-condemnation, right? Stop being stern so Raquel doesn't feel threatened by me. Now look at her face. But embrace it. Embrace the challenges of life. Embrace the pitfalls. Embrace the troubles you're going to go through, because at the end of the day, it has made me a better man than I am. And as we say it all the time, it's that dark past that's always going to be the greatest asset I have, right? Because I'm going to sit across from me many times. I've sat across from me many times, where I'll have a young man talk to me about all his problems. And dude, I've been through that. You know, I've done that. Here's what I did. And if I don't know, call Mike. He did it. Call Ralph. He went through it. Call, Joe. Joe went through that, I remember the first time I went through, when I got divorced, I thought I was the only guy that ever got divorced in AA. I know that sounds crazy, but I was in a meeting one day and some guy says, you have a topic. And for her, I was young. I can't believe I'm going through a divorce. I'm the only guy going through a divorce. Around 40 guys put their hand up. Yeah, I've been that too. Like, that's how blocked off I get when I'm in me, right? So embrace the past. Can't change it. Embrace it for what it is. And Mike, what do you have on that?
It's a great question, Ralph. I believe a version of me would be here, but I don't think the depth or the experience would be as useful hadn't I gone through it. I think, when you look at step 6 and 7, it says, he's going to remove these defects of character as they bear for my usefulness. So I've struggled with what I've struggled with, and I've wrestled with a lot of things. I'd call my sponsor crying, struggling with sex stuff, struggling with food stuff, struggling with money stuff. And he would literally say to me, God does not choose the qualified, he qualifies the chosen. He goes, if you stay sober through this, you're going to help a lot of people. And I'm thinking, well, I want to stop. Like, I've got enough evidence. I can help whomever. But the reality of it is at the same time, even going through it, there was a belief that I'm going through this because if I stay sober, God will use this, just like he used my drinking, just like he used everything in my life to help people, And I was at a men's retreat a couple of weeks ago, and I left with a couple sponsees because I can talk about the big elephant in the room about sex, and I can talk about food, and I can talk about money, and I can talk about dying in the middle of AA, and men come and they go, I need help. And again, it's, hindsight's 20/20, but I can see what God's doing. And I don't think I would have, again, if whomever, my sponsor at the time, again, all he did while I was doing that was push me into AA. I was blowing my life up, self-will run riot. And I think he knew I wouldn't stop. So he said, I need you to go get 2 new sponsees by the end of the week. He just knew he wasn't going to get in the way, because I'm also not the kind of guy that you're going to get in my way. If you're going to tell me, hey, leave women alone, I'd have been like, I'm out of here. He didn't say that. He just said, and I say the same thing to guys I sponsor today. You can do anything you want as long as you're willing to suffer the consequences. You want to do that? Go do that. But here's what's coming. And it's okay that that's coming, as long as you're willing to cash the check. But you're a big boy, you can do whatever you want. This is your life. And I believe this too. God will help you clean it up. And then he'll use it to be useful. And that's where you'll get to be free. So do I think I would still be here? To a certain degree, yes. Do I think it would be as effective? I think God did exactly what he was supposed to do with my life. And I do believe, it's the same thing in Bill's story, that for if an alcoholic fails to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through the work and self-sacrifice for others, he will not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. I just hope for myself, moving forward, the trials and low spots are just because life is in session. They're not so much self-imposed. Because as a younger man, early in recovery, a lot of it was self-imposed. I was just living trial by fire because I felt like I was on top of the world. You took my life and turned me upside down, and I thought, this is crazy. I'm on a, you say it, I'm house money. I'll press in the bet every single day because God's got me. But I'd like to live a little bit different today and allow, again, to be in integrity with that and be the example that I believe God would want me to be with that. So the demonstration is, which I think is what needed to be, because I think people see me today and I hear it from people. You've changed. You're a different guy. And it feels good to hear that unprovoked, because I feel like God's come into he's shifted the insides. So it was a great question.
Oh, yes, it was, Ralph. Thank you so much. Before we post the recording button, let it be noted that I do not think that Jimmy is stern. I just think his voice sounds stern. And I want to second that. I really believe that if there's somebody that I just see like integrity, it's like you, Jimmy, for real. So now that it's in the recording, Debbie, we can pause the recording now. And I would like very much to thank you all.